Welcome to the Create What You Speak podcast. Join me as we have a real-life discussion on how to change your life by changing your thoughts. Remember, question everything, trust yourself, and find your truth. Welcome to the Create What You Speak podcast. My name is Sloan Fremont, and I'm your host. This week, I have a really good episode for you that I'm really excited about. If you are interested in the topic of commitment, of finding out more about archetypes, about karma, about expectations in relationships, then I have the guest for you this week. My guest is Dr. Carmen Hara, and she is a world-renowned intuitive psychologist, best-selling author, radio show host, and relationship expert. Over the past 28 years, Carmen has helped over 40,000 people rediscover peace of mind, reclaim their personal power, and regain joy. All the things that we talk about on this show. So Carmen is also an author. She's a radio show host, and she's been featured in many, many publications. So Carmen, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here this week.
Oh, I'm happy that you decided to have me. I'm happy that you decide on this topic.
Yes, this topic is something.
This time of the year when Valentine is coming and everybody's into how to generate more love, how to find somebody to commit, how to find my love partner. I don't want to be alone. Most likely, COVID, people struggle with online dating. People have a hard time meeting each other because of all these restrictions.
Right.
So it's significant, to give some information about this topic.
I totally agree. So let's start out talking a little bit about, I know I did a brief introduction, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your newest book, Committed: Finding Love and Loyalty Through 7 Archetypes?
Well, I've been working with people for a very long period of time, for many, many years. Probably over 30 years. I've noticed that people struggle with love more than anything else, and nothing hurts like love.
Right.
So I studied psychology for a long period of time, and I noticed that people don't find their match. And I did couple therapy in New York for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. And, through my expertise, through all those experiences, I realized people want to stick with each other, but they don't find their match. And if they don't speak the same language in a metaphoric way, that they don't get along, and they struggle, right, and they argue, and they're miserable together.
Right.
And that's a reality. So then I said, what is the explanation? And I realized that we all have certain personality traits. And our personality traits, our weaknesses, our strength, our capacity to commit, our capacity to love, our capacity to stick with our families stems, from our archetypes. And I've studied the concept of archetypes in school, and it's an idea that has been introduced in psychology by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was actually inspired by Plato. Plato, the Greek philosopher who 2,000 years ago with the theory of forms. And from the theory of forms, Carl Jung introduced in psychology the concept of archetype. And the word archetype is actually a Greek word. And it comes from two words, archeum and typo, which means original behavior. And we are such original people. If you look at somebody, at their behavior, we're so different one from another, the way we perceive life, the way we act, the way we interact with each other. Mm-hmm. So we are not black and white. We're so colorful when it comes to our emotion and our way of expressing ourselves. And that defines our archetype. So if you understand your own archetype, and if you understand how many archetypes exist out there, then you have a predictability to figure it out who's your match.
Right.
So the best way, to find your partner is not necessarily through the methods of divination. You pull a card and you find out, oh, this is my guy. Right. Or you do a astrological, numerological card. Those might not be accurate. But when you psychologically interpret, the behavior of somebody and knowing your own type, then you 100% know where you stand. Now, nobody is born a certain archetype. When you're born, we used to say, well, you're born with certain predisposition to become a certain archetype. Mm-hmm. More so, there is a dominant archetype and a recessive archetype. In other words, you are not necessarily a narcissist. You can be a dominant narcissist, but you may be probably romantic somewhere, as a recessive archetype. So there are different archetypes within yourself, but there's always a dominant one. And as I said, there is a predisposition towards a certain one. But if you understand your archetype and reading the book, that's what the book does. Defines in simple terms your capacity to commit and your capacity to love.
I see. Okay. So an archetype is a set of behaviors by any given person would have. And so again, as you said, instead of pulling a card or looking at the numbers or reading palms, right? Understanding your behavior and other people's behavior can help us get closer to finding a match that's more maybe suitable for us, or one that's more probable to last. Would that be accurate?
Exactly.
Okay.
I totally believe that that's key. Actually, if you look at this online dating system, what they actually do, they try to match people based on this system. Mm-hmm. So they put you, when you go online and put your name, they ask you a million questions. Actually, all those questions are trying to define, who you are, how you act, how you behave, patterns of behavior, of thinking. So they try to figure it out who will be your match based on that, So there are systems of compatibility based on the concept of archetypes.
And so does your archetype change over time, or are you pretty?
That's a good question, because archetypes, like everything else in life, you change. You're not the same person. If you look in a mirror 10 years ago, you're a different person. Your personality changed, the way you look at life, your perception of life changed,
Right.
Your ideas about the universe might change as you get older. Your needs, your desires are changing. So does your archetype, in which way you can work on your archetype. So a certain predisposition, a certain way of expressing yourself, a certain pattern of behavior can be, worked out. So at the end of the book, I do define the well-rounded archetype, the ideal archetype we all aspire to become. So at the end, you want to be the good archetype, the perfect archetype. You want to be, somebody who is capable, to create a wonderful relationship.
Right.
And have the best family and participate, in the right way, in fulfilling your life. But for that reason, you have to admit that these are the issues that I have. Exactly. Like when you're an alcoholic, only the day I have a problem with alcohol, then you can work on changing it. Unless you say, I have this problem, I need to change it, you'll continue to have it. So the same thing is like the book address issue. You discover yourself reading the book. You find this is me, but what can I do to change this? Can I change it? Absolutely.
Right. And it's so interesting to say what you just said about, you have to be willing to look truthfully at yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to admit things about yourself that maybe you don't want to admit, or that maybe you're scary to admit. And that willingness to admit, when we keep these walls up, or we keep these masks on, right, where we're this fake version of ourselves, right? When we're doing right. And those things that we think bring us closer to people are actually what puts us farther away from people, because we're not being authentic. We're not being the real version of ourselves. Right. And so, your book when I was reading it and going through, thinking about the archetypes, because this is not something I'd ever really thought about, from a relationship perspective, but it was very, very, like you said, to the point, easy to explain, easy to understand, but then also very practical, because you can see how you can use it in your own life. And in the book, you focus on 7 archetypes, but can we give just a couple of examples for the listeners so they can understand maybe some of the archetypes and then maybe some examples of what maybe the positive and negative of those?
Absolutely. And just make a parenthesis. America has been living with archetypes in politics, for instance.
Right.
We've seen presidents or major people, not only political figure, famous people in Hollywood, that they display a specific archetype. And we look at them and we may or may not a certain characteristic that they display. And we've seen this. And is there something we can do? They may not even want to acknowledge that they have this problem, but the problem becomes obvious, especially if you are in a position of power. If you look through history, that kings and queens and, they were narcissists, and they have all those and all the wars and things that happen through history that have a lot to do with the archetype in people. So what I'm trying to say is, God forbid you're a narcissist in a position of power, or everybody else will have to suffer because of that. But I'm going to go and try to define in few words, but just describe the main characteristic of an archetype. That's why I made the book very simple, that everybody can identify the essence of who they are in terms of behavior, patterns of behavior, and patterns of behavior are very hard to change. And even psychology admits that, when those clusters of neurons in the brain, they form a pattern of behavior, you need to work very hard to break through that,
Right.
Because already when you establish a certain pattern, you need to admit that the pattern exists, and then it requires a diligent work on a daily basis,
Right. The awareness, you have to be aware that the pattern is happening.
Becoming aware and on a daily basis, because this is the way addiction is formed. This is the way a lot of wrongdoing, and self-destructive behavior is created within ourselves,
Right.
And we live in a world of autoimmune disorder and a very destructive behavior in people nowadays in the world. That's what we acknowledge. So I made a parenthesis. But coming back to the archetype. So one of the number one archetype that I see a lot lately in the world is the independent archetype. Okay. I've seen this in women lately, women who want to be independent. They don't want to be just working and cooking at home and taking care of kids. They want to have their own idea. They want to do podcasts. They want to do stuff, you know what I mean? To have a name, to create something solid for themselves, to build a personality, to have a mission, to be on a mission. A female, 222, 22 is a 2 in the ancient teaching. This is definitely a female. 1 is the male and 2 is the female. So we live in an era of women. But the independent is somebody who struggles with commitment, because for an independent, freedom is everything. You know, you don't want to give up on your freedom. So being involved with somebody else means the fear of giving up on what you cherish the most, your freedom. Yeah. So an independent, I've seen this in people, will have a very hard time getting married. That's why you see people late in life, they've never been married. I see a lot of people, I've never been married and I'm fine. You know, I date a lot of people in the same time, but I don't want to get married because life is beautiful like this. Why should I settle down and start to struggle and be with the same person? So the independent doesn't think this way. He is forging his own path. He has his own path and he sticks with that path, you know. Right. Now the independent never gets along with another independent because they're too separate. They go separate. Yeah,
they would repel each other. Right?
Yeah, they repel each other. Two people who, if you put them in the same room, they will hardly talk to each other. Right. They will have nothing to say to each other, you know. Right. So, and that's one that is very, very present nowadays. Then there's the workaholic, again, very present lately. The workaholic is different than the independent because it's somebody who wants to have a wonderful family, but wants to be independent in the same time, but wants the family to. But he will sacrifice. He will sacrifice his significant other for the sake of his work, because his work comes first.
Mm-hmm.
That husband who comes home very late at night because it's so important, or he might not even come home for an entire week because he has important trips to do everywhere all over the country or in another part of the world, because job is so important, because it means the money, it means the food on the table, but that's a pretend. Because
and also the identity, because a lot of people identify with their job.
So true. But he will sacrifice his significant other, exactly like he will sacrifice an employee who is not performing his good job.
Mm-hmm.
But he pretends in front of the world, yes, I want to be, you know what I mean? Married, I want to be married. A family is very important to me. But most important, it is the job.
Right.
So this is very close to the independent, but still somebody who wants both worlds. Then is the narcissist. Now the narcissist had such little humility, such a heightened ego, and the whole world, as we know very well, is around the narcissist. We've seen the narcissistic behavior very present again nowadays. Right. You know, a narcissist will not pay attention to his significant other, you know, because he doesn't care about his. Right. The narcissist will actually get along with another narcissist, because two narcissists will love each other.
And they know their game. They know each other's game.
Exactly.
And they feed off of it.
They are perfect for each other. For each other. I just don't want to give examples, but America lived for years, you know, with something like that. You know, we have a narcissist with another narcissist, and that was the perfect marriage. You know, so, and we see this. We've seen in the Kardashian, we've seen a narcissist, Kim, with married to Kenya, two perfect narcissists, you know, that they adore each other. So I don't want too many examples, but it's so obvious, you know, it's so obvious when people are narcissists and they get along with another narcissist. Then there's the free spirit. The free spirit is somebody who pretends that he wants the best family, but he will leave you in the middle of the road. You know, he will leave you in the middle of the ocean, because freedom is very important for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
He said, "Oh, let's get married in 3 weeks," and then he's ghosting. He vanishes. You know, those weddings in which you know, only she's there, he's not there, he just vanished the planet Earth, nobody knows where he is. So that's what happens with the free spirit. With the free spirit, with a little bit of a work, you can at the end help, you know. But my opinion is that the free spirit has no idea sometimes what he's doing, because he wants to be free, and if he runs away from a situation, he feels amazing. You know, if he's getting involved and then he runs away, he said, "Okay, I did it. Oh my God, I'm so proud of myself that I was able to run away from the situation that I didn't really want to get involved into." But it's a pretend. Everything is a pretend.
Well, and it's interesting as you're talking through this, as you, and in the book, when you explain the rest of the archetypes, as people start to read this and understand this, when you're just meeting somebody or you're starting to date somebody, you can start to see some of these characteristics in people and even ask questions around that kind of stuff, but then also decide early on, is this kind of person the right one for me? Right? Because I was reading this, I mean, in my own self, I can recognize the independent person, right? The person that wants the relationship, but then is also afraid to give up the freedom that they have as an independent person.
And you should always, everybody read, you should be aware, an independent, and in 99.9% of the case, will not give up on his independence for the marriage or for a commitment. No. Mm-mm.
Right.
And then the one that I really want to pinpoint is the wounded warrior. And I'm giving this an example of our president right now, Biden, who suffered a trauma. If you think of him when he was very young, you know, he lost his wife and his kid in a car accident. That's something so traumatizing that you will never probably recover fully. And I think if somebody goes through a trauma like this, he will always have a mask. He will always be hurt for the rest of his life. He will always try to heal. He will always have empathy. that's why you see somebody in a position of power who went through this kind of trauma, who will cry if somebody comes to him and tell him he lost his significant other in another accident. He will empathy. He will have the same, he will experience the pain. You understand? So for me it's very hard to heal something like this. Trauma like this probably can never be fully healed. And those people are, their mind is affected. Their, the cognitive mind is affected. They suffer forever. And they need somebody who's a hopeless romantic, or another wounded warrior to heal each other.
Right.
If a wounded warrior finds a narcissist, it's a catastrophe. It's a tragedy.
Right.
Or an independent, because you'll never understand the pain of a wounded warrior,
Right.
You need to understand that pain, and you need to understand that trauma, that turmoil that exists within that person's soul. Trying to pretend that didn't happen to him and he's gonna be okay.
Right.
But
right.
he might
Again,
never
like you said,
okay.
another mask. Let's move in a little bit about expectations in a relationship. As I talked about, understanding the archetypes helps, I think, with expectations, because you can kind of understand somebody's past and really start to see the person maybe a little more for who they are rather than who you want them to be. And that's really important early on. Like what you hear so far? Take what you've learned and invest in yourself with the Create What You Speak Academy. Visit createwhatyouspeak.com to learn more. Now back to the show. In the book, you talk about expect great things, but don't create expectations. Can you tell us a little bit about expectations in, your thoughts on expectations in relationships, especially in the beginning?
I just want to finish something, if you allow me to. Talking about the wounded warrior, I give you my own example. I need to tell you this. I married my husband, and I was married for 27 years till he died. But my husband, when he was 16, lost his mother. When she was 40, she crossed the street and she was hit by a car and she died.
Oh,
my husband never recovered all his life.
Right.
So I married a wounded warrior. All his life, my husband was hurt and in pain and self-destruct and died relatively young because he couldn't. Every day he was telling me, I see my mother in the corner of the room. So he never was able to heal this. So I'm giving you an example. Married somebody like that,
Right.
So and then I thought I need to write a book on this, because people should know when somebody suffered that kind of a trauma at an early, and it happens that kids lose their parents or young people lose their spouse. You know what goes through life, but this kind of a loss will stay there with you forever and you might never be able to heal. So I wanted that to be, I give my own example as an example, So, so you were asking me about expectations. So, how was exactly the question? How,
well, just as we were talking through archetypes, and to me, reading through this as I was thinking about dating, understanding these personality traits, these behaviors of people can help you identify early on if somebody's a good match or not. And I think also having this kind of knowledge helps you see someone for who they really are early on rather than who you want them to be, right? Because sometimes when we meet somebody, we want them to be something that maybe they're not or they're not capable of.
They're not. So here's the whole thing. So being aware, fully aware, like I wanted, so again, go back to my example. I wanted my husband to be what he could never be. You understand? I wanted him to be okay all the time and be happy with the 3 kids that we had, with me, with the rest of the family. And he mimicked to be, but inside him, he was never, what I wanted him to be. So I want everybody to understand, if that's the case, that's what's happening, Or if you marry, you know what I mean, a free spirit, be aware that he might just leave you in the middle of the road. Don't be surprised if one day you go home and he's gone. And you wonder, what have I done? Is it me? I haven't done anything wrong. And he doesn't necessarily leave you for another woman, or no, he's just ghosting you, just like that, because he has that free spirit and he needs to go the other side of the world, you know what I mean, to find, I don't know what, his freedom.
Right.
You understand? So this is when you understand the manifestation of an archetype. You have to be realistic that that's something you have to live with forever in your life.
Right.
And you might not be able to change. The things that you cannot change about people are reflected in the personality traits that are the archetypes.
Right. And having those an understanding of that up front, I think helps set expectations, right? Because again, then you're not going to try to make somebody be,
Absolutely,
for me,
right.
Right. When I noticed that I used to do was I would make somebody be something they weren't. I just wanted they would show these traits at the beginning, maybe where they were, in the beginning, you're showing your best side 100% of the time. Right. And so, but as we know, as time goes on, then you see the real person. And so being able to set realistic expectations, I think also helps us not waste time. It helps us with our, not get let down maybe so hard because we wanted the person to be something else. It gives us it grounds us more in reality of what we're really dealing with the person.
Yes, because if you go by astrology, okay, I am an Aries, he's a Leo, perfect match. Yeah, perfect match. But in the real world, those problems that we are carrying, those are the ones, that are the prevalence. Those are the most significant ones. And we have to take those into consideration. What we carry, something that we sometimes consider to be our karma, something we carry with us that determines our life together,
So let's talk about karma, because you, in the book, you give a definition of what it is and what it isn't. And I hadn't heard it put that way before, but I really like the way that you explained it in the book. So can you tell us a little what karma is and what it isn't and how it relates to commitment?
I love this concept. My first book, actually over 20 years ago, was called and was very successful. That book, probably the most successful book I ever was able to write, because it was in New York, it was everywhere, translated 23 languages. Because people are so fascinated by the idea in itself, because karma is the memory of your soul. It's everything you do on a daily basis is stored somewhere in the reactive side. So the right side of the brain is called the subconscious mind. Everything is deposited somewhere. All your deeds, all your activities, all your thoughts, all your action, all your emotion, all your feelings, are stored somewhere.
Right.
And they sometimes, wake up to life, and they are they need to be processed.
Right.
Everything you've done, one day, sooner or later, you need to act upon. You can't just put them there and leave them aside.
Right. As much as we want to, that's not how it works.
Yeah, as much as we want to. People think, it's the Newtonian law of cause and effect. But it's way more than that. It's just the memory of who you are. It's the imprint of your soul. And we work, the way we function, we work on those imprints of the brain. Mm-hmm. So the brain store imprints, and we function on those. It can be actually proven scientifically and medically that we work on those imprints at the cellular level. So at the cells level, those imprints exist. So I call those imprints karmic imprints. Now, karma is something individual, is something family. So you have those imprints in the family, and there's global karma. There are things that this COVID is a karmic disease because it repeats itself, because what's karmic keeps on coming back. So in other words, it can manifest again. So if it happened in 1918, 100 years later, comes back to us in a cycle. In a very interesting way, things come back in a cycle. Problems with economy in 1929 will come back in 2029. We see them already about to explode in the same way, So this is karmic. Now, karma is also considered law of restitution. It's like a luggage. You carry this, you never lose this in an airport, this luggage. You carry it with you, and it becomes heavy because it grows. If it's not a process, if it's not resolved, if it's not understood, it becomes heavier and heavier and heavier on your shoulder. Mm-hmm. So, and that applies to you, to your family, and to the community, to the globally, to the world, to the collective the planet Earth. So it applies, to all of us globally. So that's something like exactly the disease it's a global thing. It's a global karma. It doesn't affect one individual. It affects all of us.
Right. And so I just want to make sure I got the definition right. So so karma, because we do sometimes, I mean, it's described as law, cause and effect, right? I do this, then that.
It's not,
right.
It's not the laws of cause and effect. So that's that Newtonian law of cause and effect would be way too simple. It's the totality of your thoughts, action, feelings, emotion, everything that you actually put in universe, and you create in this way the memory and the imprint of your identity.
Right. That's what I wanted to clarify. It's not the cause and effect.
No, it becomes your own identity.
Right.
It's the imprint at your cellular level, because you become who you are. You know what I mean? Through your cells, your cells are so, as much as they carry the biological genes, the genetics, they also carry your personal imprint of what you create during your lifetime. Right. So, and this is the way that something is transferred. You transfer those to your kids, and kids transfer it to you, and this is where it becomes family. Is your imprint can be transferred to the next generations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's why we said, something that my grandparents did, I pay for it. I heard this a million times. Is karma a payback? Is karma something that is a punishing law? Because we use the law of the restitution, the law of justice. The number one law of spirituality is the law of karma. Mm-hmm. The law of stability, the law of balance, the law of equilibrium. It brings things in balance. If you act wrong, you know what I mean, and continue to do wrongdoing, sooner or later you create a negative imprint that is transferred at the cell level genetically to the generation to come. And it creates, at a certain degree, it creates a genetic modification. So don't be surprised if the third generation, God knows what happens to them. And then they say, well, I'm paying for whatever my ancestors did wrong. But in fact, it's an imprint that is transferred to the next. Do you know what I mean? You understand?
Yeah, that's so fascinating to me. And I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to just quickly shift gears before we lose time, because I wanted to talk to you about this also. In the book, you say that a major step to changing your relationships is changing the way you relate to your problems, and by extension, the way you speak about them. And that's a big part of my show. What I talk about is how we speak about things, because we create.
You're so right. I love what you do.
Thank you.
To congratulate you. I was so moved by your whole idea. I said, this is genius. I said, this is brilliant. It should be actually a TV show. I was so inspired. I don't know if you ever thought about presenting it to some networks, or
that would be a good idea. I have not thought of that.
It's such a genius idea. The idea that should be emphasized, because at the end of the idea, we are what we speak. What we speak, we become, and what we think, we speak, and this is the way the physical reality becomes.
Manifest, yes.
We create a reality as a result of our thoughts, but the language, the words vibrate, they resonate in the universe in such a powerful way, talking about the way we create an imprint and the way we create karma through our words, at the end.
Exactly.
Words play such a significant role. And they create a significant role in relationship that we have with ourselves, with the people around, with family, with the communities, with the world around us. It's just so complex, and it's like create that ripple effect,
Yes, I do know. And so, as I said, this is the basis of the show and what we talk about. And so when it comes to relationships, I always talk about that we get these stories on a loop, right? Where we'll repeat them, and we'll say, I can't have the relationship I want, or, I'm always going to, my phrase that I always repeated was, I'm always going to be alone. Like that was my
where you put that, that's what you get.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Put that, that's what you get. The moment you say, no, I am. So that's why affirmation, rewire the brain. What did I say at some point? There's clusters of neuron creating pattern of behavior, but those clusters of neuron can be reprogrammed and rewired by the power of your own words.
Right.
So if you say, I am going to meet my perfect match in the next 3 months, and keep on repeating that. And guess what? He will walk on you at the corner of the street. It's going to be so amazing and so powerful that even you're going to be amazed.
Right. Well, and that's, yes. And I think also with shifting gears and moving from those negative thoughts that we've picked up along the way, however that was, but moving to the more positive, that space in between where we start to shift it, that's to me has always been the most critical point, because it's where I'm having these arguments with myself, like, yes, you can have it. No, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Right. And if you just stick with it, what I found in my own life, if I just stick with it, if I just keep moving into that positive direction more than I'm not, how much that literally changes your whole everything. It changes everything. And it starts in the stories. It starts in your want, your desire, and you're being relentless with not letting those negative stories take over.
Absolutely. I cannot agree with you more. Yeah.
And I think I like in your book, you talk about that. There's a section on that, and you give different examples and different things, because it is so key. It's so key.
Right. Yeah. So the more, reprogramming the mind is the hardest thing to do. Reprogramming a pattern of behavior is the hardest thing to do. But the more you're diligent, and the more, the work that you do, the better it gets day by day. And you can do this with everything into your life. If you have a disease, if you have any kind of a problem, you can actually fix it.
Right. And it starts in the mind, right? It starts with how you look at it. It starts
in the mind, and it works. It goes deep, deep, deep to the core of your being, the core of your being being your cell, the cell you're coming from, that drop of cell you're born from. And you go to the cell level, what I mean? You repair those cells, and you repair everything in this way. And you get everything you want, and everything becomes possible.
Right. And it's amazing because we have the power to do this, and we do. We can. I've done it in my own life. I know you have, and your book is amazing. Congratulations on it. Congratulations on the success. And I want to thank you for joining me this week. We could talk for, I think, a long time, but we're coming up on the end of our time, unfortunately. So
I love to invite you. I have 2 radio shows. I have a show on Home Time and a show on ABC. And whichever one you prefer, I would love to invite you to be my guest.
I would love to come on.
Yeah, please let me know what I'm having my assistant, Sarah, sending you some dates, and you pick up whichever one you prefer. I would adore to have you on my show.
Oh, amazing. Yes, I'll definitely do that. Yes.
Please.
Awesome. Thank you. Grateful. Before we wrap up real quick, we've talked about a lot of things, from archetypes to karma to expectations to commitment. What's one piece of advice you'd leave the listeners with today to really foster a truly healthy relationship?
Find somebody in your life whose definition of love, family matches yours. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think asking those questions early on that's not something I ever did either. I never asked those questions early on. I just waited and then found out we weren't a match. So ask them early and ask them often. Again, Carmen, thank you so much for joining me this week. In your book, Committed, Finding Love and Loyalty Through the 7 Archetypes it's an amazing book. I hope all the listeners get it. I really enjoyed it. Can you tell the listeners how they can find out more about you, your radio show, and getting your book?
So it's very easy. My book is everywhere. Buy it at Amazon, buy it in bookstores. And my show, you go to www.carmenhara, CarmenHarra.com. My name, CarmenHara.com with double R. And you click on radio shows. I have 2 shows. One Friday, it's KMET, ABC Radio. You can listen on the radio. You can also listen online. And another show on Tuesday on Home the station from Washington, D.C. You can listen on that one at 7 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday. And then, of course, you can see all my books. I'm doing almost a TV show lately because being Valentine, everybody asking me a question about relationships. So this is the time to the TV. As I said, I'm looking forward to with you on my next show whenever you're available. I'm grateful for your time, and people can email me at Carmen Hara as well. Be my friends on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media. I want about it.
Okay, awesome. And I'll link to all your things in the show notes so the listeners can find it. Thanks again, Carmen. And you've been listening to the Create What You Speak podcast, brought to you by webtalkradio.net. You can also hear the podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite podcasting platform. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you will join me for the next episode of the Create What You Speak podcast. Check out my website, sloanfremont.com, to learn more.